Hello, all you lovely cosmonauts. As always, I am Cosmic, and last night I watched the Game Awards, and then I went to bed, and I woke up this morning with an inbox full of emails from all you lovely people asking me what my thoughts were on Mass Effect Andromeda's new gameplay trailer. And so I thought, well, hey, why not? Let's talk about it. I have plenty to say on the matter. But first, a point of order from my last video. I talked about the story in the last video, and some of the information I gave was factually incorrect, mainly because my research led me to factually incorrect statements made on various websites, so I apologize about that. So let's talk. The first thing I wanted to start with was this. Yes, the character facial animations that were showcased that looked horrific. I wasn't sure if this was Mass Effect or it was the pretext to another Event Horizon movie. Like, holy crap, that is scary. That's the kind of thing that I dream about when I've eaten too much cheese before bedtime. All joking aside though, this is a little bit concerning, and I'm going to tell you why. Now, the developers have went out and tweeted since people have raised the issue and said, don't worry, we're going to polish the game, we're going to fix everything up, we're going to continue working on it until release. However, I'm still concerned because Mass Effect has always had bad character animations, especially in the facial region. Even when you had Shepard, which was a pre-rendered face, his smiles were just awful. And here's an image of Shepard smiling in 2010, right? Now, this is an image of Ryder's facial animation in 2016. Now, this game has been in development for, 2, 3, 4 years nearly. And not only that, but we've increased and had a complete change of engine. So they're now using the Frostbite engine, which you would think would allow for better facial quality animations. And I know for a fact it does, because we have other games that have fantastic faces from the Frostbite engine. So I don't really understand why the facial animation is so bad. Now, they say you have to remember that the fact that these aren't facial scans, they are customizable faces, which I agree to at a certain point. However, just because a face is customizable doesn't mean that you can't input a template within the facial structure that will give you realistic expressions, because we've seen it in a number of games before. Not only have we seen it in a number of games before, but BioWare have been traditionally terrible at facial animations, which makes me think that they either need to hire some extra facial animators or they need to come up with a new way of animating faces, because this is not acceptable. This look like the facial animations, everything around the face, like the body and the background and the overall graphics, looks massively improved, but the faces don't look any better than the last 3 games. Yes, they're a slightly step up in terms of texture and in terms of graphical fidelity, but in terms of actual expression, they're not that much improved from the previous Mass Effect games. And that's just not good enough, in my opinion, especially in a story-driven, heavily narrative-driven game. You can't expect me as a player to get immersed in a character like Ryder, become that character, roleplay that character through the game, and have god-awful facial animations. Like, this picture, what is she doing? Is she upset? Is she angry? Is she tense? Is she smiling? I don't know. I have no possible explanation for what that that facial expression is, and it's just not good enough, and that is going to be a severe problem if that continues to the final product. But enough about the facial animations, let's talk about the overall gameplay footage that we saw. So first I want to talk about combat, which was towards the end of the trailer. The combat looks fantastic. I was very impressed with the overall look of the combat. It looks a lot more fluid than the previous Mass Effect games. It looks very in the style of Dragon Age Inquisition. It's kind of a blend between Inquisition and Mass Effect 3, which I don't particularly mind. I liked the movement. I liked, the gunplay that was shown. I thought that was very interesting. I thought it looked great. I had no particular problems with the combat itself, at least at this point, without actually getting my hands on it. Now, I mentioned it looks like Dragon Age Inquisition. Does anyone else think that? Does anyone think that this game is looking more and more like Dragon Age Inquisition in space? And I'm not sure that's a bad thing per se. However, that does draw some very serious concerns from other aspects of the gameplay. So let's talk about exploration. Now, exploration has been something that I have been cautiously worried about for some time, mainly because of the scope of the game, the ability to explore planets, the return of the Mako, and the ability to roam around in this vehicle. What are you actually going to be able to explore? What are you going to be able to find? Because exploration is all well and good, but like No Man's Sky has proved, exploration for the sake of exploration without actually having it meaningful and without having things to actually find is boring, dull, and problematic. So the first meaningful thing that we saw in exploration was, of course, the connection to crafting. Now, crafting wasn't really showcased per se, but you did see that there were multiple things on the equipped to the character that you were able to craft. Now, I enjoyed somewhat the crafting in Dragon Age Inquisition, however, it did have some vital flaws, in particular the fact that crafted equipment made loot drops completely negligible. It made them pointless. You could always craft something better than you could find, and that for me ruins loot systems completely. You should have equal measure in that regard. You should be able to craft powerful items. You should also be able to find equally powerful items, maybe slightly different items depending on your gameplay style, but it should both, as separate entities, be meaningful and at the same time be crossed. So you should be able to have synergy between a loot system and a crafting system. And without that meaningful synergy, then one is always going to make the other completely pointless. That being said, my biggest problem with the exploration and my biggest concern, like I've said in my previous video, is the fact that is the exploration going to actually be meaningful? Now, the game, interestingly, the narrator of the trailer said this phrase, this specific phrase: every planet has its own story. Well, I can tell you right now, BioWare, I'm going to bloody hold you to that statement. I am going to hold you to the highest regard in that statement. So when I play this game next year, if every planet doesn't have its own story, me and you are going to have a sit down and talk, my son. Other than that, I was impressed with the graphics of the game. I thought it looked great. I liked the fluidity. I loved the fact that they showcased just briefly a couple of the companions, including the Krogan Drak and the Turian female, and gave some voices of different characters. I loved that. I think the entire world looks very interesting. The universe, the story, it all looks really interesting. But there are a couple of concerns I feel that still have not been addressed. And ultimately, if they don't get addressed, and some of them can't be addressed to the point until we see the final version of the game, but I think that the idea that this could be a Dragon Age Inquisition in space worries me a little bit. There's nothing particularly wrong with that idea. However, Dragon Age Inquisition did have several flaws and several problems that I hope do not translate into this game. I think that certainly take some elements, the good elements of Dragon Age Inquisition, because it was an overall good game. You need to take some of the good elements, leave the bad parts out, and make something that's unique and make something that still retains the idea and the core of Mass Effect. I am a little bit concerned, once again, though, about the statement that they made where you can make new allies and there's choices. Oh, God, a Mass Effect game with choices. What does that actually mean, though? We've talked about the ending in the previous video where they've said, it's going to be like nothing that came before, which, again, that's not a particularly high barrier to entry in that regard because what came before was god-awful. So is this going to be another game where choices have consequences? Is it going to be a game with multiple endings? We don't know. I imagine that there will be plenty of choices because, that is what Mass Effect is all about. But will those choices be meaningful? For me, it has to be to succeed. If you don't make choices meaningful in this game, then you're once again completely negating the feedback of your entire bloody community once again. Now, I am all for game creators making the games that they want to create. Creative freedom is a top priority in my mind when it comes to the creation of video games. That being said, BioWare, you owe your fans, you owe the players of the Mass Effect games, you owe them big time, because they spent a ton of money. They spent a ton of hours playing that trilogy and got slapped in the face at the end, completely broke all your promises. And I find it difficult when I see the developers tweeting, trust us, we won't let you down, trust us. I'm sorry, that trust has been broken a long ass time ago. So how about you prove it? You prove yourselves to the fans that you can create a game that they deserve and that they want. So yes, there's certain good parts about the trailer, and I think it showcases some, I'm optimistic about it. Let's put it that way. I'm optimistic, but I'm cautiously optimistic. There's some good points in there. I certainly like the look of some items in that trailer. However, there are still serious concerns that have not been addressed in the trailer and probably won't get addressed until I get my hands on it next year. So I hope that answers your question, everybody. Thank you so much for watching and listening. As always, let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. And as always, I will see you next time.